Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with a Shield Hero video this time specifically. It is a Shield Hero volume review and summary and I guess spoilers. Anyway, yeah, welcome. This is volume 6. Alright, so this is going to be the first video of the review series. I haven't started with the first volumes because the anime kind of already covered that and it would be reiterating points from the anime. So we're just going to go head forward with all the Shield Hero volumes that are currently available. I will slowly be working through them and giving my thoughts as we move forward. Of course, if you're curious about what's going to be happening in Season 2 of the Shield Hero, well, this video will give you all the spoilers. Now, for your ease, if you look in the description down below, you'll see like there's time codes for the summary section and the review section. If you don't want to have the summary section, you can just move over to the review section. Alright, now let's begin with the spoilery summary. Chapter 1. This chapter focused on two things. One was worsening the tensions between the four heroes. In other words, they were being even more unreasonable with their accusations of Naofumi cheating and being unhelpful. The heroes did not take kindly to being told that they were weak. The second thing this chapter did was introduce the concept of the 7-star heroes. Like the four heroes, the 7-star heroes had a unique special weapons. Those weapons included the staff, the hammer, projectile weapons, gauntlets, claws, axe, and the whip. The chapter included some extra details on the weapons and the acknowledgement that there was some overlap with the weapons' functions. Weapons that were talked about in detail were the projectile weapons, which is a weapon that can turn into anything that can be thrown, like daggers or kunai. And then we had the whip, which can control the power of monsters and change into chains or a flail. The big point that came from this chapter was that the 7-star heroes that were currently appointed were stronger than the 3 heroes. This chapter also told us that the 7 stars were in other countries dealing with other waves. A small point of this chapter was that Itsuki was asked to thank Risha for her contributions during the battle against Lark and crew, which led into some events later. Overall, this was a setup chapter that depicted the state of the heroes, introduced the 7-star heroes, and set up the whole Risha issue. It also set up a training arc and the potential of Naofumi having to go to another country to do a rift because the 3 heroes were just so undependable. Chapter 2 was a simple chapter. It told us how Risha met Itsuki, that being Itsuki saved her when she was sold off due to politics, and it told us that Naofumi had actually seen Risha before in Season 1 when they crossed paths with Itsuki. This part just served to establish that Risha was heavily indebted to Itsuki. The more important thing this chapter did was that it followed up on the idea of Naofumi having to go to another country from Chapter 1. Also in this chapter, it was revealed that Vittoria could communicate with Philo through her cowlick, and in doing so, heard about Naofumi having to cover a lot of the heroes' slack. Once she knew that, she offered to deal with the waves in other countries so long as Naofumi was making the effort to get along with the other heroes and strengthen them. So that last part was slick and well executed, and it was a great way of introducing the capability for Vittoria. This chapter ends with Risha being upset. Chapter 3 follows up on 1 and 2 by showcasing an extremely nasty side to Itsuki. In the chapter, it's revealed that Itsuki's group framed Risha, saying that she broke Itsuki's favorite bangle. After hearing all the details, Naofumi tears into him, concluding that Itsuki was motivated by jealousy and offense because the person in the party that he deemed the most useless was the person that was praised by the queen and was pivotal. Just to give you a taste of this conversation, what I've already said about it is the truth and needs no elaboration. Risha lied about her actions. She forgot about her debt to me and was only using me for her own ambitions. Removing her from my party is only natural. To which Naofumi replies, and you don't think that any of your party members are just lying about it? Which goes back to Itsuki. Seriously, you would accuse my trusted teammates of lying to me? I don't think that is likely. Risha has been with us for the shortest amount of time. Therefore, I have reason to trust their word over hers. And it gets worse. Naofumi was no fool. He asked one of the shadows before he confronted Itsuki, and the shadow confirmed that Risha was innocent. That shadow also informed Itsuki, but Itsuki refused to believe the shadow, and when called out on that, Itsuki immediately changes tracks and says that they did it for Risha's sake. Anyway, this chapter just depicts how terrible Itsuki is, if you didn't notice, and it also served to remind people that Naofumi still had a chip on his shoulder over being falsely accused. His anger was high exactly because of that past trauma. All this anger led to an epic scene where Naofumi just renders Itsuki powerless, tanking all his hits till he was right in front of him, taunting him. All this later led to Risha joining Naofumi's group after Risha failed at a suicide attempt. Risha was really in love with Itsuki, and Naofumi took her in as a way to give her a second chance to improve herself. He wasn't ready for how pathetic she was though. One very interesting factor of this chapter though was Motoyasu, which we'll talk about in the review section. Chapter 4. We find out it's 2.5 weeks until the next Melomark wave, and this chapter was mostly power acquisition and gear acquisition. The funniest thing from the chapter is that Naofumi thinks Risha has a fetish or something for wearing costumes. Beyond that, it covers Keel's joining the party after he and Nice Guy from Season 1 come to the capital. The chapter ends with Naofumi telling Keel and Rishia that they need to become his slaves. Chapter 5, this was mostly the setup for leveling and training Rishia, Keel, and Raphtalia, but then halfway through we get an interesting follow-up to Raphtalia's backstory. One of Naofumi's trainers, one of the best swordsmen, is introduced, and her name is Eclair Sayato. She's the daughter of the noble that governed Raphtalia's home. Eclair had been missing from the story because she was hunting down the people that sold off Raphtalia's village. Anyway, the chapter ends off with Raphtalia being trained by Eclair for sure, as Eclair could give Raphtalia techniques. Chapter 6. This chapter continues the training by bringing up a person that we had seen before, the old lady. Turns out her fighting style allows her to rival the 7-star heroes. What this chapter does is that it reveals that Rishia actually isn't pathetic, revealing that she had good affinity for the martial arts that the lady could teach. As the master said, Rishia was 1 in a million. Anyway, the master is scary. With just a stick, she was able to demonstrate a defense-ignoring attack called Point. And for anime fans, the style revolves around the use of life force or chi, you know, like that general Eastern type of energy. Yeah. Chapter 7. This one focused on Eclair versus Ren. They had a confrontation. Ren and the other heroes didn't think it was worth training with the advisors, which led to Eclair challenging Ren because honor, which then led to Ren being outskilled and put in his place. It wasn't as bad as the Itsuki deconstruction, but Ren didn't have a good time here, and he ultimately had to use a skill, which was cheating, in order to get his victory. Anyway, this led into the other heroes finally being roped along into the martial arts training that, even though they complained a lot about, they actually ended up going for. Chapter 8 features the continuation of the martial arts training and features Rishia actually hurting Naofumi after Rishia's life energy is riled up by a new medicine that Naofumi learned how to make. This chapter served to establish Rishia as a future potential that Naofumi could possibly use. Chapter 9 sees the culmination of the Naofumi versus the 3 heroes tension and conflict, with the 3 heroes being let out into the wild because of how unreasonable they were being. The best moment of this chapter is when Naofumi sums up the exact problem each of the heroes has to make it easy for the reader. This chapter also sets up the next big conflict when the heroes are told of strange monsters appearing around the country that they'll need to help deal with. In the background, there's also the continuation of the training that the volume was doing, and we had the deteriorating relationship with Ren, and then we had just the general tensions between the heroes and Raphtalia learning some new spells. Chapter 10 was a simple transitionary chapter where party members got new equipment. In this chapter, Naofumi also meets a critical character, a woman with Asian features that asks Naofumi to kill her. Yeah, I know, we went 0 to 100 real quick here. Anyway, the woman disappears before Naofumi can follow up. Chapter 11 is a chapter where Naofumi and his bolstered party, that includes his 2 trainers, go to deal with the monsters, and there they learn that the monsters are targeting people and other monsters, and that monsters came from the east. This chapter also takes place in the village that Naofumi once helped with the bioplant. Chapter 12 has the situation with the mystery monsters evolve as the 3 heroes are acting suspiciously enough in their denials of knowing the monster's nature. They are so suspicious that Naofumi and the Queen assign spies to them. Meanwhile, Rishia tells us that she's seen the monsters in a book that she doesn't recall. Chapter 13. This is the chapter right before previous plotlines and tensions reach a climax. In this chapter, Naofumi and the Melomark team try to figure out what's going on after the 3 heroes escaped to the east, saying that they're going to be doing their jobs by going there. In their confusion, the team learns that Vittoria is not going to help them catch up to the heroes because this is where they have to decide if they're going to save the world or save the people. Meanwhile, Rishia provides info that she knows the monsters from an ancient legend about a creature called the Spirit Turtle. With more info, the team gets in the carriage and heads east until a mysterious shake occurs that causes the countdown to the wave to pause and causes a new hourglass with number 7 to appear. Naofumi is then advised to return to the castle by a shadow. Chapter 14 is a pretty big chapter. Everything sucks. The Spirit Turtle is on the move, countries have come together, and Naofumi decides to play the role of a hero and gives the allied forces, a coalition army, a rousing speech. Chapter ends with Naofumi's party, Naofumi, Raphtalia, Philo, Rishia, Eclair, and the old lady martial arts master moving towards the Spirit Turtle, which is big enough to have a giant mountain on its back. It's practically a moving mountain. Chapter 15 covers the fight versus the Spirit Turtle. This fight was used to showcase the fruits of everyone's training and show that it wasn't a waste for the characters that were in the training. The chapter also features Naofumi making a declaration about what he wants to do and shows the epic combo between Raphtalia and Philo that decapitates the turtle. Chapter 16 is the final chapter of the volume where Naofumi and the gang and the army go onto the back of the turtle. There they find a cryptic message written by a Japanese hero of the past, but it's too deteriorated to fully understand. The chapter also features Naofumi feeling good about being praised and shows the army being a little bit dickish when they try to loot the destroyed town. The chapter makes a big effort to tell readers that the spirit turtle troubles aren't over yet. And then we have the epilogue, which takes place 3 days later. In it, we learn that the 3 heroes are missing ever since they went to the east, and Naofumi hears a voice that tells him that the fight isn't over. The chapter ends on an optimistic note where Naofumi says he's looking for the 3 heroes because the world needs the heroes. And those are the summaries for the volume. As you can tell, we were doing a lot of training in the volume. There were very interesting things that were going on during the volume though. And the 2 areas that I would like to focus on for the sake of this review were specifically what was going on with the heroes and what was going on with Naofumi's new party members, or like the new people that were helping out Naofumi, Eclair and the martial arts master, because there was a purpose to what was going on in the volume. To go on the heroes, what was really interesting was that Motoyasu actually had a redeeming moment in the volume. He was the one that had initially gone and found out what was going on with Rishia, and he was the one that brought Naofumi in when he had the opportunity to. It was explored that Motoyasu, he was killed by a girlfriend in his past life, right? So he has trouble with girls like Rishia, and Rishia has a little bit of an obsessive tendency towards Itsuki. So it was really interesting that in a volume where you had the other 2 falling so hard, you actually had a really bright moment for Motoyasu, because he was there and he was being a positive force. Now mind you, when tensions run high, Motoyasu kind of defaults just being terrible along with the others, but there were little moments where the heroes called each other out on some of their bad behaviors. But that leads me to the bad behaviors. Itsuki and Ren got really throttled in this particular volume, and the reason that occurred is because we had so many volumes of just seeing Motoyasu fail in all the different ways, and now you had to establish that, well, you know, these other 2 guys are pretty terrible as well, so let's just very quickly go through why they're terrible. And with Ren, they were just showcasing Ren's just horrible sportsmanship. Ren was just... One of the embarrassing moments for Ren was where he was gloating about how he had once beaten a really famous player, but this famous player was famous for another game, so Ren beat him in his own turf. So, you know, when he's saying that out loud, you know, the idea was Ren was hoping people would think he was cool, but then the other 2 heroes were like, well, no, that's pretty unfair. That's pretty stupid, Ren. And it was just little things like that. Ren kept trying to keep up this facade of being this cool guy, and every time he tried, after being like horribly whooped, it just didn't work. So I covered that Ren and Eclair had a duel, and the duel was like the big moment, because in the duel, Eclair was just berating him for being stupid at fighting, because he did something where he turned and revealed his back to the girl, and she was just ripping into him, and she had him on the defensive, and once he couldn't bear with it anymore, he unleashed a skill which was against the rules. And of course he did something like trying to say like, oh, you are strong enough to make me want to use my real skill, and it's like, Ren, shut up, you suck, you suck 100%. Everyone agreed. So it was great to have those little moments. For Itsuki, you already got the taste of his moment. Itsuki was just a terrible person all around. This particular volume also had a side story at the end which covered Itsuki's just story of meeting with Rishia. Itsuki just got ripped apart too in general. The side story just frames Itsuki as being a person that doesn't really understand the true meaning of justice, and it's just he just wants validation. That's just all he really wants. So in this portion, what you really take away from the volume when it came to the 3 heroes is that the volume was doing a lot of stuff to character assassinate the 3 heroes. Like, the volume wants you to really dislike the 3 heroes, and with the way that Naofumi talks about them, Naofumi at one point gives you 3 nice paragraphs explaining each hero and what exactly the problem is. At that point, Naofumi's judgment should be taken seriously because of how neat it was. You have to say that, okay, this is what the author wants to convey to the readers. Now, the other aspect of the volume is coming in that training. One of the big questions throughout all of this was, is it actually going to be worthwhile for the heroes to train with lesser people that don't have the power of the holy weapons? Is that going to be worthwhile? Even Naofumi at the beginning wasn't sure, but here was where the difference with Naofumi was. Naofumi knows that he should be putting in a little bit more effort. Naofumi knows, well, he's a little bit more open-minded in general. So with the trainers, he looked at them, he looked to see what they were offering, and if they had something that was legitimately good and worthwhile, he was totally into it. And so when you have that happening, You have Naofumi again doing what he does, and he's actually listening to the people who have the skills. And through that, he finds out about a lot of different things. He started the volume with this question about he wants to know how to deal with Lark and his defense ignoring attack. Well, it turns out the martial arts master has a way to deal with defense ignoring attacks, and it's through the martial arts. So Naofumi goes down that particular route. Through that, we also see that Rishia had a unique gift. So when you have all these elements going on, what you had in the volume was essentially, the volume was showing how these people were acquiring powers by listening to people who were more skilled. And then you have the final fight, which is just there to say, hey, look, all these people are more or less useful. They are useful. They are making a difference. When you have Eclair there, showing that she can more or less keep up, when you have the martial arts master there and she's showing off her own capabilities to try and make the situation against the spirit turtle work, what you ultimately should be taken away from this is, if we didn't train with these two people who were experts in their field, Raftalia and Philo would not have been good enough to take out the turtle. That's ultimately the conclusion that the volume wants you to take away from this. So when you consider that particular thing, the spirit turtle fight in this particular volume ends up being a very important fight only for justifying the other characters. In that way, that fight is a plot device. When you have all the characters having their big moments in that final chapter and showing the fruits of their labor, that's when you know it's a little bit of a plot device, on top of being a cool fight that climaxes the novel. So if we were to talk about the build-up, when you have the majority of the volume working towards showing the little improvements that everyone is making, choosing to have a big fight at the end and including those other characters, even though they don't fully mesh with Naofumi's party, because Naofumi's party are the people that have the slave crest on them. When you have that final thing, it's nice. It's a nice celebration. It's like it's rewarding the reader for also being willing to go along with the journey of bringing in those other two characters. The last person to talk about is Rishia, but Rishia kind of jumps off of the previous point. Rishia starts this volume off being really pathetic, and she is still pathetic by the end of it. But one of the valuable things was this volume had to establish why Rishia would be a good core member for the party. And believe me, Rishia is going to have more moments in the future. But for this one, Rishia finding out about the ancient legend that led to the clues about the spirit turtle, that was something that was uniquely hers, and maybe the queen's, but Rishia got it first. Maybe the queen could have come in there if Rishia was never there and could have supplemented that information, but we'll never know. Point is, the story wanted to show that there were areas where Rishia could flourish in, because she was the character that was coming into this with being useless according to Itsuki. Similarly, you know, when you had Rishia actually hurting Naofumi, that's something that not many other people were capable of doing, but Rishia did it. So when she was able to do that with Naofumi's aid, and while they were figuring out how to use the martial arts energy, that was a great moment that legitimized that, well, Rishia will have something that she can uniquely contribute. It also helped that the beginning of the volume was also a little bit about finding Rishia's proper place within the party. So this is still a storyline that is still up in the air. Going into volume 7 and 8, she's going to get her role properly fleshed out by those volumes, I think, maybe. But yeah, overall, this was a little bit of a transitionary volume because the problems with the spirit turtle aren't solved yet, as you can tell at the end of this particular volume. So good transition, it was good setup, it was good training, and it was a good showcasing of the fruits of the labor. Anyway, that was volume 6 of Shield Hero. Guys, if you read the volume, how do you feel about it? Do you enjoy it? Let me know down below. And if there were any other little cool things that I missed out, please let me know down below as well. Anyway, till next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.